Good morning, and thanks so much for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the financial advisors and the father-son team behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. WelcomeHomeFP.com is the website. Find out more about Ralph, Tim, the entire team. You can also set up a time to speak with them right there, WelcomeHomeFP.com, or you can give a call right now, 804-635-3550. Don't worry, this is not you going on the air right now. This is just to get on a calendar for the week or the weeks ahead. But that number, once again, for that complimentary conversation, 804-635-3550. My name is Chris Swan, and I'm pleased to be joined, as I am always, with the father-son team. Ralph, Tim, good to see you guys again. How you doing today?
Doing great.
Hey, we're doing pretty good. Just riding that roller coaster here in the state of Virginia, the good old weather roller coaster. But other than that, things are going well.
You know, the ups and downs of the weather here, the ups and downs of the market, there's a lot of things that we cannot control, but we can prepare for it. Know that there's going to be warmer days, colder days. Know that in the market, there's going to be days that are kind and days that are the opposite of that. But if you have a plan in place, you can get through whatever may be thrown your way. But hoping that the weather is going to be one way, assuming that the weather is going to be one way, or that the markets are going to be one way, that could probably lead to some disaster. And actually, there's a list over at gobankatgreats.com that I saw recently of assumptions that people make about retirement that can cause problems, which include assuming that you won't live into your 90s, that you're going to stay healthy, your expenses will decrease, the markets will stay constant, inflation will remain low, assuming you'll be able to work, and assuming you'll get an inheritance. Guys, we all know what they say about assuming. Which of these could do the most harm, and are there any others you want to add?
Well, I'm trying not to make a joke of that last bullet point, right? Assuming about an inheritance. So we'll leave that for another time. Sure. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there now that I think that they kind of underestimate the lifespans. And I think that's not a great place to be, because one thing that you don't want to say is, well, you know, my father passed away at 80. I'm not going to live past 85. Well, what happens if you do? And now we're standing there at 85 with $0 left. So, you know, we are supposed to be living longer. There's different factors that come into that, but I think it's important to factor in. I mean, there's some people, we were putting together a plan for a couple the other day, and they laughed. They're like, well, there's absolutely no way I'm making it to 90. Well, you can't tell me that. Right. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important that we do focus in on that, because, you know, there's people who are living into their hundreds. So what you don't want to do is say, hey, I know at 70 or 75 or maybe even 80 that I'm no longer going to be here, so my plan doesn't need to go any longer. Then we get to that point, and here we are. Right. Another thing that kind of coincides with that is remaining healthy. I know that there's a lot of people that feel like they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. Well, guess what? You know, your health today is not going to be the same as it is tomorrow. It's not going to be the same in 10 years. So, you know, long-term care is one of those pieces we talk to folks about quite a bit, and everybody kind of turns a blind eye to it because it's not a fun conversation, right? But it is a very important conversation, because depending on what studies you look at, anywhere between 7 to 8 out of 10 people are going to need some sort of long-term care needs, whether it's staying at home and having somebody come help, or whether it's actually a facility. So these are things that we talk to folks about quite a bit every day.
And I would also pick up on something else that, Tim, you were talking about, is that a lot of people believe that Medicare is going to take care of those long-term care needs, and it does not. And people are shocked when they hear that it's going to be for medical issues and things like that, but not for long-term care. So that's one of the things. There is a misconception about that. Another thing I would say to a lot of people is that, you know, they assume that taxes is not going to be a big deal in their retirement year. Why is that? Because they've always been told that your retirement income is going to be a lot less when you retire than you are. But guess what? There's a lot of people making more money now because of Social Security. Maybe they're lucky enough to have a pension. And then all of a sudden you throw in these good things that they talk about, those RMDs, where you have to take out money just so Uncle Sam can get his taxes. So you might have a $40,000 or $50,000 RMD because you've done so well in the market over the past few years. So how's that going to affect your taxable income? Because most of that, in fact, everybody's going to have taxable income because of RMDs, because they didn't have Roth conversions and they didn't think about it and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, those are some things that a lot of people assume, you know, will happen. They're on a lower tax bracket. It's not necessarily true. The other thing is, the market's going to go back up. It's going to go up. Even if it went down before when I'm in retirement, it's always going up. Well, it is, but how long is it going to take? Right. It may be, 10 or 15 years before it gets back up to where it was. Do you have time to wait before you can start taking money out? It's not like in 2020 when COVID hit and within 2 months it had dropped down about, 25, 30%, but it was back up within 2 or 3 months. So that's kind of an anomaly within the market volatility. So those are all things that people need to be aware of. But I think another thing that people will say every once in a while, and I'm hoping they're joking when they say that, but someone will come in and say, well, I'll figure it out later. I'm not really worried about it. Well, today is the day you need to worry about it, people, because you may not have tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. And when we sit down with folks and we talk about, what their budgets look like, what their numbers look like, what's going in versus what's coming out, there's so many people that think that their expenses are going to decrease in retirement, right? So like, if you're commuting from Richmond to DC every day, obviously your gas bill is going to be pretty high, but you can't tell me that you're going to retire and not spend any money on gas. And that's where I think a lot of people say, well, I know I won't have to go out. I won't have to do this. I won't have to do that. It's still going to cost you some money. What you're going to do instead of spending the gas money to drive 2 hours without traffic to get up to DC is you're going to spend that money on taking a cruise or going on a road trip or something to that effect. Yeah, you might not be commuting quite as much, but you're still going to have those expenses.
It's the whole every day is Saturday mentality when it comes to retirement. And I think we all know, we spend more money when we've got the time to do so. In retirement, you've ideally got a lot of time to do so. And so your expenses may, in fact, go up. Assumptions are kind of like hoping. We can say that. And hope, as we said so often here on the show, not a great investment strategy, not a great retirement strategy. You want to put some known commodities in place. You want to have a plan in place. If you assume that you're not going to live into your 90s, what if you do? If you assume you can work as long as, you want to, or well past your retirement age, what if that's taken out of your hands? Putting a plan in place to take into account these contingencies, that is what the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners does. That's what Ralph and Tim, the entire team, do. Put together these plans with this retirement roadmap to help people navigate through the road towards retirement. So take the assumptions out of your retirement, put some known commodities in there. 804-635-3550 is the phone number. 804-635-3550. You can go to the website at welcomehomefp.com. Typically when we're talking about retirement, there's abbreviations out there, RMDs, IRAs, TSPs. I want to talk about a couple other terms here that will actually tie in. FOMO, that's the fear of missing out. YOLO, which is not one that I've heard in a while. That is, you only live once. And then JOMO, which you guys said you're not that familiar with. This is one that I experience a lot, actually. It's the joy of missing out. It is you guys are going to a party on Friday night. I'm just going to go to bed. I'd rather do that. As it's tied to the market, FOMO, you don't want to be the last one, to the party. You're worried that people are gaining more than you are. YOLO, that's where people are spending like they're going to die tomorrow. And JOMO is, you don't care. You're happy with not jumping in with the crowd. So for retirees, which of these conditions or a combination would be the best for them to adopt?
So I think the last one, I think JOMO is going to be a good place to be, because I think, when we talk to pre-retirees and retirees, they're not, well, I shouldn't say not everybody's the same, but they're not chasing that return. They're not chasing that percentage or whatever. And a lot of people just say, hey, look, as long as I can pay my bills and do the things that I want to do, I don't necessarily care what I'm getting. The FOMO term, I think that kind of comes with greed, is, everybody's worried about trying to get that next dollar. Hey, I bought this company stock at $100. It's down to $50 now, but I've got to wait until I get back to 100 before I decide I want to make some changes. Mm-hmm. But that's going to get in your way, right? But then also, too, the instant gratification world that we find ourselves in, I think that's a big issue when it comes to YOLO, because like we talked about just a minute ago is, if you think you're not going to be around here tomorrow, but you're here for another 50 years, your plans are going to be a little bit different than what you're working towards. So I think it's very important for people to focus in on what they're trying to accomplish. I know we say that quite a bit. You got to figure out where you want to be, the things that you want to do, and how to get there. And that's what's the most important thing, is because it's not about that investment, right? It's not about that particular holding. It's about the strategies. And if you can say, hey, this is what I want to do in retirement, the fun things and the not so fun things, you put together a plan with the strategies that, need to be a little bit flexible, because, tomorrow's going to be different than today, and so on and so forth. But you've got to there's so many people in that camp of the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Mm-hmm. And that's where people get it wrong most of the time. And that's when they're either going to have to continue to work or they're going to not do the things that they want to do.
And I would say for most people, they need to be in a JOMO frame of mind, if that's what you want to call it, because you got to know what you want. You got to be happy with who you are. You just can't keep up with Joneses all your life. It's sooner or later, you got to say, hey, this is who I am. I don't care if you like me or not. I don't care. This is who I am. This is where I want to be. I mean, you have to be happy with who you are, but you have to have a plan. You have to know what it is that's going to make you happy. Now, is that going to be the same as it was when you were 20 years old if you're 70? No, but you got to be happy with who you are, be satisfied, and live the life that you want, not somebody else.
The only time you should be keeping up with the Joneses is if you are, in fact, Mr. or Mrs. Jones. Take care of yourself, put together that plan for yourself, and, understand that the purpose in retirement is no longer about chasing these high gains. It's now turning it into that income. And so if you could provide a bit of stability, that consistent income, that can go a long way to, perhaps having that joy of missing out when you see the hiccups that are in the market and Jim Cramer screaming at the TV, things like that. Putting together a plan, a comprehensive plan like that retirement roadmap can help you, I think, enjoy that and have that joy of missing out. 804-635-3550 is the phone number. Set up that complimentary time to come in to any of the offices in the Richmond location and speak with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can also go to the website, welcomehomefp.com. I was really hoping, Ralph, that I can get you to say YOLO, but that is okay. We'll move on beyond that. I'm going to talk about food here. So Oreo cookies. Any fan of Oreos knows about double stuff. The name makes you think you're getting twice the amount of filling. It is called double stuff, actually. But years ago, there was a math class at a New York high school, put it to the test and found that double stuff Oreos fell about 7% short of double. So double-ish, not quite as catchy. But the label created expectations. The reality was different. It's kind of like your retirement money and taxes. So how often do people expect one number only to find out that taxes, well, they took their bite out of it and took more than they thought?
Well, I can tell you that people have a lot of misconceptions when it comes to taxes, right? I mean, there's still people that come into our office and say, hey, I'm 65. I no longer have to pay taxes. Well, that potentially could be true, but you got to see where your money's at. If it's pre-tax money, I hate to break it to you. The IRS does not care if you are in retirement or you are 65 or 70 or whatever the case may be. If you have pre-tax dollars, if you've got taxable income, you're going to have to pay some taxes. Now, of course, the tax codes and the tax rates aren't as easily to figure out for most people nowadays. But, we know where we're at right now. And that's what you got to focus in on is because, hey, if you've been saving all of your money pre-tax because you wanted a tax break while you're working because you thought, like most people do, hey, I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire, it's probably not going to be the case. So if we're saving all of our money pre-tax, we're going to get to a certain point, whether we want to or we don't, we're going to have to start pulling money out. We're going to have to start taking out what's called those required minimum distributions. And yes, we want our money to grow, right? Raise your hand around the table if you want your money to grow. Most people do. Mm-hmm. But if it's all pre-tax and you do it very well, then that means that's a massive RMD that you're going to have to take out. And of course, the ages varied, right? 70 and a half, 72, 73, 75, whatever. We don't know where it's going to end up being in the long run, but we know where it is currently. So what you don't want to end up doing is just keep socking away this pre-tax dollars, having that money grow. And then the next thing you know, if you hit 75, you got an RMD on $5 million, right? You want to make sure that maybe along the way, maybe we start taking out some distributions. Maybe we do some Roth conversions. But there's a lot of people out there that have those misconceptions of, well, I won't have to pay taxes in retirement or I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Tim, because, the biggest surprise to most people, and we see it every day. In fact, I just got off the phone with two of them this morning before we had this conversation about they needed some money out of their account. And we always go over, if you do take this money out, this is the taxes that you're going to have to pay. And they're like, what do you mean I got to pay that amount of taxes? Well, if you're pulling out this amount of money, you're in that tax bracket, this was going to be. Well, guess what? They just don't disappear just because you retired. And that's where a lot of people have a misconception. And that's why we try and help engineer solutions to minimize those tax situations for people, particularly if you are a business owner and you would like to sell your business and all of a sudden you mean, what I got to pay taxes on that for? I mean, those are some things, or real estate. And, a lot of people have rental property here in Richmond, and all of a sudden they're wanting to sell out because they get tired of 2:00 in the morning phone calls. Oh, my dishwasher broke and I was trying to clean my wine glasses out. So all of a sudden you don't like that anymore. You want to sell it. And you expected to get $500,000 for the sale, and all of a sudden they tell you, "Oh, your cost basis is 100, so you're going to owe 400,000 on capital gains taxation." Then they start looking at you like, "What are you talking about?" So those are some things that we do try to help people minimize those taxations when they have that problem, particularly as a business owner or real estate. And Social Security is always going to be taxable. Just the amount that's going to be taxed is based on what your income is going to be like. Another thing that people need to be aware of is if you make too much money, may not be called a tax, but you do have IRMA to worry about. And IRMA is basically going to mean that your Medicare premium, if you're on Medicare, is going to go not just a small amount, it's according to how much you make, and it's going to be there for a couple of years. It may 2 or 3 times what you've been paying. Is that in your plan? So I think another thing that we do have to let people be aware of, and during our roadmap process, we do explain some of these things, such as in case you are married and you have both Social Securities coming in, okay, one of you passes away, the other one's only going to get, the higher the paychecks. But guess what? You may be in a higher tax bracket because now you're not married, filing jointly. You're going to be filing single. So that tax bracket may be a little bit more than what you were used to. So those are all things that I think people aren't aware of, because if you're single now, you might have to pay more in taxes than you did when you were married. So those are all things, like I say, people need to be aware of. We all talk about federal taxes, but guess what? You still have state taxes to worry about also. The state government needs as much money as the federal government. Maybe not the same amount, but they still need it.
They're all rooting for you to be successful, because if it's in pre-tax dollars, that means that they get their share of it. Is it their fair share? Well, that is debatable. It is.
Well, one thing, Chris, I heard the other day from Bill Murray, and he said that, America is great because you start with nothing, you work hard, you make a lot, and then so you can give it back to somebody else later down.
And truth be told, I bet you could probably imagine better uses for the money than what the government is utilizing it for. I don't want to go on a whole tangent with that, but, everybody knows how money can get lost, especially in the stock market, a down market. If you sell, that's money being lost. If you're paying more in Medicare charges, that is a loss. If you're paying more in taxes than necessary, that's money that you don't have in your account anymore. That is also a loss. We can't control the market. We can, with proper planning, get a hold of the other two and be able to utilize that for more money for whatever you want to do. But like I said, it does take some planning. The team at Welcome Financial Partners, they can help you out with that. 804-635-3550 is the phone number, the website. Find out more about the team. Find out, the many times that they're on TV. We had a joke about that a little earlier before the show. We'll get into that, but see them on TV as well. Find that listing over there on the website, welcomehomefp.com. Over on Market Watch, a gentleman wrote in with a question. I don't want to get into the question necessarily, but the way it started, he said, "I spend 5 hours a day on my portfolio." This was a 70-year-old gentleman, by the way. If somebody walked into your office and said the same thing, "I am essentially doing a part-time, possibly full-time job, just watching the market," what would that tell you, and what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, if my mouth would drop open, right? Why did you? I'm making an assumption here that this gentleman's retired, right? But I'm thinking probably with what he's doing, there's only so many hours in a day. So either his employer is paying him to work on his own portfolio, or he's part-time doing it himself and he's no longer working. So, there's a lot of people, we've run into them before where, they enjoy it. They think they can outpace, benchmarks. They can do all these things. That's not what you work so hard for, right? You want to get to retirement. You want to do the things that you want. I mean, we can bring up stories after stories where we've helped people out. We've helped clients out. And the next thing you know, they are just the happiest they've ever been because their routine used to be, Wake up first thing in the morning, make myself a cup of coffee. I get behind my monitors. I look to see what's going on and what we're anticipating. And now we can kind of put a lot of that to bed, and they don't necessarily have to worry about it, or they could rely on us for that. And now they have the extra 5 hours in the day that they can go do the fun things, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that's where, it's so much different when you're not working than when you are working. So if you're retired, those years are supposed to be used to do the things that you've always wanted to do that you've never been able to do because you're working so hard. You don't want to spend a big portion of your day focusing in on the stock market. So why not take some action today, put some things in place, some strategies in place so we can make sure that no matter what happens in the market, we're going to be okay.
All right. And I would say to most people, they just need to have something they want to do. I mean, if that person wanted to do that for 5 hours a day, that's a job at that point in time.
Right.
It's not a passion. That's a job. And I don't think your spouse would like for you to do that all the time. So just be aware. Yeah, they might. Who knows? Who knows? But as fiduciaries, I just don't think a lot of people want to spend that much time. And do you have the experience? Do you have the knowledge to do all the things that you are doing right there? So, because at that point in time, if you're retired, you're really going to make sure that you don't want to lose that money in the market, even though you're doing 5 or 6 hours. Because like a lot of people at that point in time, the average rate of return of the last 20 years, about 7.5% in the S&P 500. But for the average investor, it's around 2%. So what's the difference? Because that just means people are doing the things in the market, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're doing the right things, because people will get into the market when it's high and they get out when it's low.
Which is the opposite of what we've all been taught to believe, the buy high, buy low, sell high. As you get closer and closer to retirement, as you enter into retirement, what is your goal? Everyone's retirement is different, right? But is your goal to beat the S&P 500 or try to beat the S&P 500? Or is your goal to enjoy the fruits of your labor, to use that time to do whatever it is you want to do? It's probably the latter. I'm sure there are people out there who want to play in the market, and that is well and good. But for the majority of people, if you can have a hands-off approach, if you can develop a plan where you don't have to have your day dictated by what the market is doing, because you know that income is going to be coming in regardless. I think that can go a long way to helping people relax and enjoy their retirement. And so if you want that hands-off approach, set up a time to speak with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, welcomehomefp.com, 804-635-3550. You can set up a time there as well. Talking about that income that's coming in consistently. Social Security is just that, but there is a little bit of a cloud hanging over it as we continue to talk about the insolvency program that it has. President Trump has said how much he admires what they have over in Australia. He says the country requires employers fund private accounts for their employees and mandates that employees participate. That money is invested, and that pension goes to retirees who meet certain income and asset criteria. The program is working over there. Do you think that it would work over here?
Well, I couldn't tell you if it can or it can't, right? But I think it's an interesting concept because there's multiple layers to it. It's not just relying on the federal government, but there's not going to be one perfect solution. The issue being is not making adjustments, not making improvements along the way. Mm-hmm. Right. Taking a look at what they're doing compared to what we're doing. Obviously, the employer's got a big piece of that, but they're actually investing the money. How do we do it for Social Security? Right. We're more into the treasuries, the fixed income type side, which obviously if the stock market's doing well, right, what would you rather be in, an equity or a treasury? So I think that's one of the biggest things. And I can tell you, I don't know if I've got too much faith in the government putting the money in the right place and trying to make that grow. And I think that's why it's always been on the treasury side. But I think anything is worth discussion. I think where we currently are with Social Security, obviously we know changes are going to happen. Now, when they're going to happen or what the changes look like, we're not 100% sure, not until we get closer, but it just seems like we keep kicking the can down the road. So I think it's definitely something to take a look at, but there's always going to be some kind of trade-offs. There's no perfect solution, but I think it's important to focus in on, what we can do and how we can make our system better.
And I would say that, this has been kind of kicked around for a little while. I remember several decades ago that they tried to privatize a little bit of that, and it did not go over very well within the political arena. And that was when we were pretty much civilized between each other. Now we're not as civil to each other's ideas. So
what time was this? I don't even remember this time frame.
This is before you were born.
Yeah, there we go.
For sure. But I would say, those are the type of things that is, if we make changes like that, it's going to take a while to do it. It's not going to be an overnight program. Is the idea worthwhile looking at? I'd say yes, but you also need to understand there would be some new rules and regulations from governance, whatever you want to call it, their oversight. And that's as much as I'm going to say about that, because we could get off on a real tangent with the government oversight. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years with that philosophy.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm going to make this one little joke and then we can move on from this. But what would we name it if we changed Social Security? What would we name it?
I have no idea.
Nobody watched the State of the Union, then I guess it would probably be named after him.
More than likely, I would assume that. But here's the thing. If this system were to work, capital I, capital F, people that are getting close to retirement right now, people who need that income right now, they're not going to have the time on their side to let this pension grow, to let this grow. So they're still going to need money. They're still going to rely. We wouldn't see the success or failure of this for a good number of years from now. That doesn't help people that are getting ready to retire now. They want to make sure that their Social Security situation is squared away, even though, like I said, there is that big question mark about 2033, what's going to happen, at that point. But it factors into the plan. With any good roadmap, that if it veers off course, you can find ways to get back on track. And so if that income does get cut, if there is a reduction in benefits, figuring out how to get back on track and be able to maintain your retirement, that's the beauty of having that plan put in place. So we talked about those assumptions and those hopes earlier in the show. Don't assume that Social Security is going to stay in the state that it's in right now. Take charge, start developing a plan. The team at Welcome Home Financial Partners can do that. You have to set up a time to speak with them, though. 804-635-3550 or welcomehomefp.com. I want to thank you for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Stay safe out there. Stay warm or cool, depending on what the weather is going to be for the coming week. But take care of one another. Gentlemen, always appreciate the time. As we wrap up, I'm going to leave you with a final word.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate your time as well. And I think, there's a lot of things that are going on right now in the country and the world and what have you. And I think now more than ever, it's important to have that plan in place so you don't make any type of irrational, emotional decision. Things are going to go up, things are going to go down, but you got to make sure, especially as you're approaching retirement, if you haven't already retired, that's a key time to where we can make sure we get steps in place. There might be some things that you need to improve upon, move around, realign, reallocate, and these are all things that we can help you out with. So we appreciate everybody listening and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.